The Orlando Magic won the top pick with Paolo Banchero. We're going to talk to the guy who was leading the Banchero bandwagon all season despite all the odds. We're going to talk to Rafael Barlowe of Locked On NBA Big Board. It's time for a big edition of Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is July 28th, 2022. My name is Philip Rossman. I'm the expert and site editor over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we're going to talk with the Locked On NBA Big Boards, Rafael Barlowe, about Paolo Banchero, what he saw in Paolo, what he saw from him in Summer League, and why he could be the missing piece for the Orlando Magic. Plus, we'll get into how the Magic can get the most out of their young players from our draft expert. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for. The Locked On Podcast Network, it's your team every day. Before we dive into our discussion about the Magic's rookies, just a few quick notes that I want to kind of get out of the way before we get into that. First, Paolo Banchero officially announced that he will be playing, or was officially announced, he didn't announce it, but he will be playing this Saturday at the crossover in Seattle. We've seen some of these videos start to pop out, and hey, it's good to have these videos again, because the Magic have been kind of out of the Pro-Am circuit for a little while, but it's been good to see these kind of appearances pop out. Paolo will be playing at the crossover. It's a big Pro-Am tournament up in Seattle, where Paolo Banchero is from, and it's really cool. He's going to be playing alongside DeJounte Murray, although it's not 100% clear DeJounte Murray is going to play this weekend. But it's going to be really, really cool. We should get some good highlights. That's really all these are for. They're not super detailed. We saw Chuma Okeke get some run. It looked like in either a pickup run or a Pro-Am run in Atlanta after his basketball camp. He was notably wearing a polo while he was playing, which is very Chuma Okeke. And then there's this video going around right now of Jalen Suggs during his pickup run, which of course is really good to see because that means Jalen Suggs is healthy and able to play again, which means he's able to get some work in this offseason. And I'll let everyone else do Zapruder film study of Jalen Suggs' jumper and all that stuff. I'll wait to evaluate him when we actually see him play basketball games in the fall, in September, October. Again, this is the time to tinker with stuff. This is the time to experiment with stuff. So again, not super the end of the world. If it's all not perfect together, there's still time to bring it together. We're not going to see these guys in training camp till late September. Again, Labor Day is kind of the time that most players come back into their home markets. They do pickup runs. They do kind of voluntary camps and workouts with the coaching staff to get ready for training camp. There's still a month to go before we get to that point, and there's a lot of work you can do in a month. So we're starting to see these pickup runs. We're starting to see these things come together, and that's of course really exciting because it gives us a little bit of a taste. Just kind of setting the calendar for what we have the rest of the offseason. We have. Paolo Banchero is going to play in the crossover over the next few weekends. I think there's 2, maybe 3 weekends left. There's at least one regular season weekend left. And then they have their playoffs. Who knows if Paolo is going to do more than one appearance at this thing. But we'll see Paolo at the crossover this weekend up in Seattle. We'll have Eurobasket at the end of August, where Franz and Wagner will both be playing for Germany. Those are kind of the most notable basketball items on the calendar here for the Orlando Magic before we get to training camp, before we get to the games actually counting and the work actually working towards something. So plenty to get to. We're going to do our group project here at Orlando Magic Daily. We'll discuss that on this show. So we'll have plenty to talk about. We'll do some history stuff here in August as we get ready for the season. Before we get to Rafael Barlowe, I do have to make a special note. You probably see the hat. Congratulations to Orlando City SC, the local MLS team here. Took a 5-1 victory over the New York Red Bulls, a burst of scoring, which this team has not had all year. A 5-1 win over New York Red Bulls to advance to the U.S. Open Cup final. They'll play Sacramento Republic FC in the final on September 7th at Exploria Stadium here in Orlando. It has been a while since Orlando has taken home a trophy. Orlando City has not played for a trophy since the MLS's back tournament back in 2020. They have not won a trophy since their USL days, their final year in USL, if I'm not mistaken, in 2013. We have, obviously the Orlando Apollos kind of won a championship in the AAF. Honestly, the last trophy that the city of Orlando has won in a major sporting event, so excuse me if I forget somewhere, and I probably have, so please correct me with the latest trophies that Orlando has won. The last one that they probably won is the controversial UCF National Championship, which was a national championship. It is officially recognized by the NCAA. It's been a while, and so again, I think there's a lot of American sports fans, not soccer fans know what's going on, but American sports fans who are like, what is this U.S. Open Cup thing? Why is it happening in the middle of the season? I know I've had to explain, like, hey, in the soccer world, there's different competitions that you compete in simultaneously. You've got your regular season, you got your domestic cup, which is a single elimination tournament featuring every professional team in the country, or the ones that at least pay to enter. And then you have your Champions League, which the winner of the U.S. Open Cup will get to compete in the CONCACAF Champions League next year, which was won by an American team for the first time ever this season. Way to go, Seattle Sounders. So it's really exciting. Anytime you get a chance to bring a trophy home, that is really, really awesome. And I'm really excited for this game, and I think you should be too, which is why I want to note it here. We may bring on some of our soccer friends to preview that game because it's September and we won't have much else to do. But want to give that special shout out as well. We're going to get to our conversation with Rafael Barlowe. No more delay, coming up here in just a moment. But first, a quick word from our pals at Built Bar. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor to try. Delicious, indulgent cookie dough. Covered in chocolate, that's right, Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite cookie dough chunk puffs. They have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 1% real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it or the stomach aches that come after. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Run to Built.com to snack a box for you and the family. It'll be the perfect treat, or you can find a really good hiding place and just hoard them for yourself. Like all Built Bars, new cookie dough chunk puff is covered in 1% real chocolate. That means they're healthy and tasty. Chocolate-covered cookie dough with a light, fluffy texture. They're so good. What's great about Built is that all of their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff, whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just need to grab a quick bite. Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, fat, and sugar. Grab yourself a Built bar. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off today. When we come back, we'll be chatting with Rafael Barlowe about Paolo Banchero and a whole lot more. And we are now joined by Rafael, Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, our draft expert, the conductor of the Paolo Banchero train throughout the draft process. Rafael, first off, how are you doing, man? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing good. Looking forward to this show. Like you said, I was kind of running the Banchero bandwagon, and so I'm glad. It's kind of like tooting my own horn in a sense, but I'm just glad that a team saw what I saw back in like November with him. I've had him number one on my board for months, and I'm glad I never wavered. I stuck with it, even though I didn't think he would go number one. I thought that Jabari Smith was going to go number one, but then at Summer League, I felt like he showed why, at least in my opinion, why I think
Yeah,
he's the
and I
best
will
prospect.
issue my I will come prostrate myself across the altar here and beg for forgiveness, because I was very much on the Paolo train pre-lottery, when it was like, oh, oh goody, I won the locked on pre-lottery mock draft. And when I got in that seat, I got cold feet. I got cold feet on Paolo. I had him number 1-2 on my board throughout the draft process. And then you just start kind of nitpicking his game a little bit, or nitpicking everyone else's games a little bit. And, this draft was just, it felt really unique, in that there were 3 guys that legitimately could go number 1. I mean, sometimes you see 2, most of the time it's pretty obvious who the number 1 guy is. Just
Yep.
from, your history evaluating drafts, how unique was the position that the Magic were in, having to pick between Paolo, Chet, and Jabari?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a unique situation simply because if you go and look at the front office history, Chet seemed like the type of guy that they would draft based off their history. And then you look and see that the teams, one of the biggest areas I thought that the Magic needed help in was 3-point shooting, and that's what Jabari does. And so a lot of people assumed that Banchero was the worst of the 3. So I think they were in a very a good situation of having the number 1 pick, but also a good situation that they had options. Sometimes there are bad drafts where somebody has to go number 1. And I think in this draft, you had guys that could go number 1 in other classes, and I think there's like at least 4, maybe 5 potential franchise type 1A or 1B type guys in this draft. So I thought they were in a good position, but I feel like they made the
Yeah,
right
for sure.
choice.
Let's dive into that then, and kind of get into why the Magic ultimately came to Paolo, and I guess we'll just kind of view it through your lens. We talked ad nauseum pre-draft about these 3 guys, and again, I feel like we kind of nitpicked, and maybe got a little bored, and kind of, got in our own heads. It happens when you're evaluating guys, is you see them so many times, you start to kind of look for things that aren't there. But why was Paolo Banchero number 1 guy on your board throughout this whole process? What stood out to you about him? And again, you said this since November, so early, that Paolo was the guy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think if you look at the very beginning of college basketball season, I had Chet number 1 coming into the season. And I don't know if it's like the Champions Classic or something like that. Banchero absolutely dominated Kentucky. He looked like the best player on the floor. And that was despite like having some cramping issues or something like that where he couldn't play the second half. And then, at least in my opinion, the most anticipated game of the college basketball season outside of like the NCAA tournament was Duke versus Gonzaga. And I remember, kind of hyping it up and writing articles about it and talking about it on my website and making like videos, 1 versus 2. And this was kind of before Jabari had really entered the conversation as potentially going number 1. And I was Chet. And to me, after that game, after the first half, it was clear to me Banchero was the most NBA ready. I think he has the most talent, and I never wavered. It's kind of funny because I learned my lesson. Stick with your guns. A lot of times in the draft process, we may like somebody, then like you say, you start to overanalyze, you start to overthink, and then you can even like pay attention to other people saying, "Oh, this guy can't do this," and then you start looking for that. And it's like a year where I just say, you know what, I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to go by my gut feeling, and I'm going to stick with it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And that was, my theory going into this whole draft process is I was high on Banchero, and I'm not going to let the media or other people convince me that somebody else is better. And so, but yeah, I mean, I just think like overall, I felt like he's the best player simply because the way I look at it is if I have a guy that I'm selecting number one overall, and if I have 5 seconds left in a shot clock, who can I say go get me a bucket and make a play? And I felt like with Jabari, he needs to be spoon fed. He needs someone to set him up. I felt like with Chet, even though I feel like he showed more in Summer League than he did at Gonzaga, I was just more confident that Banchero can, if he got a mismatch, he can post up, he can create his own shot. And I watched like his high school tape before, and I knew that he could pass. I knew that he could play point forward, even point center if you need him to. And that's something that I didn't really get a lot of footage of at Duke. So that was one of the reasons why I was so high on Banchero throughout the whole process.
I think to some degree, like, and I agree with you on that point. Like, as someone who, I'm an NBA guy. I follow my team first, but obviously the Magic have been in plenty of drafts, and you have to know the draft a little bit. And I kind of try to go to every draft and say, like, okay, this is a lesson that I learned from the last draft. Like, I try to make it a point, and I say this every time. I don't know how well I do this. I try to focus on what guys can do rather than what they can't do. Just at a certain point when you're kind of splitting hairs, you do kind of tend to focus on what they can't do. But I think to that point, like with Paolo, I think we did get a little bit kind of caught in the weeds of what maybe he can't do or what maybe he didn't show at Duke. Again, especially for someone like me that kind of jumps in, like you're in this world, like you said, you're looking at his high school tape and to kind of get a hint of what he could be. I know I said with Chet, like, hey, the way he played at Gonzaga is not the way that he played in high school. Like, he's got a lot more in there, and a lot of these guys do because they have to kind of fit into these teams that they're playing on because Coach K is not necessarily Coach K, but these coaches are judged on their ability to win games too. So they got to do what's best to help them win as well, and you got to understand that context. I feel like a lot of the conversation with Paolo, and I'm guilty of this as much as anyone, we just kind of lost the point of the game, which is, I think, what you said really well there. 5 seconds to go, you got to get a guy that can go get a bucket. And you look at this Magic team and you look at this Magic franchise, honestly, that's been the one thing that they've been missing probably since Tracy McGrady, to be perfectly honest. And it's been that long since the Magic have Steve Francis, I guess, in the early part of his tenure with Orlando, they have just missed a guy that could just go get a basket. I mean, that's what they missed in the 2009 finals. That's why they went after Vince Carter. Vince didn't give that to them. And that's kind of why that whole team collapsed. But at the end of the day, you're right. It's hard to build a team without a guy that can just beat a defense that knows what's coming. Again, you look at the playoffs, that's what it is. And so when you look at Paolo and what he's projecting into, you said he's the guy most likely to be that way. With what you saw, I mean, it's summer league. I know it's what it is. It is what it is. But is that what is Paolo's ceiling? I guess in your evaluation and you're looking at him. Obviously, you had to remember one. You like a lot of things that he can do. What can Paolo become, or what is his ceiling for this team?
Yeah, before I get into that, I want to say one of the things about Banchero that if you look at, and I posted this on Twitter, I don't know if you saw it, but if you look at the scouting reports from 2017 on Jason Tatum, all of the areas of concern are the same exact things they said about.
I'm going to raise my hand and be guilty. I was not a Tatum fan coming out. I think in the Locked On mock draft, I don't care if Freezing Cold Take grabs this, I took Wendell Carter over Jason Tatum, if I'm not mistaken, in the Locked On mock draft.
They weren't in the same class. They weren't.
I remember I took.
No, Carter was 18. Tatum was 17. That was the class with. So that class was like Josh Jackson, Lonzo Ball.
Whoever I took, it would be embarrassing today. I know that I know. I looked back at our mock drafts. Jason Tatum was still on the board when the Magic came up. I think it was at 6, and I will raise my hand and say I am guilty of feeding into that scouting report, not being sold on the shooting, not being sold on just the scoring ability. At the end of the day, you got to put the ball in the basket. So
yeah, and I think like the comparisons where they take tough shots, they rely on mid-range contested shots, and then the whole analytics says the mid-range is not a good shot. Then even with like Tatum, you start seeing like him working out with Kobe, and then he got flack for taking Kobe Bryant type shots, and so on. And so and I guess your question was how I saw Banchero's ceiling. So I've been saying in this process that I think Banchero's ceiling is, I forgot what year it was. Maybe is it 2018-19 Blake Griffin? So it was and I mean he's a better athlete.
Forget how good that Blake Griffin
than
was.
Blake was that year. Exactly. And so you see like this guy that is 6'10", 250, but that year Blake was showing, I mean, he showed some flashes of it in LA, especially when Chris was out from time to time. But I mean, I want to say it was like 24, 10, and 5, something like that. And I think Banchero could be that guy that can be your point power forward. You can run 4 or 5 pick and rolls. And I just think like a really creative coach can really maximize all of his talent and his gifts. And I felt like you said, people forgot how good Blake Griffin was, because when people think about Blake Griffin, they think about, early Lob City, jumping over the car, this explosive athlete, but he was really, really skilled. And it's unfortunate that injuries injuries just derailed his career. But even when he wasn't as explosive and as athletic as before, I mean, he was a very good passer. I mean, I think the Pistons made the playoffs that year. And so I think that if Banchero can be like peak 24, 10, 5 and shoot a respectable percentage from 3, I mean, I just think he makes everyone around him better.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, honestly, that was what surprised me most. I mean, obviously 2-game sample at Summer League, but that's what surprised me most at Summer League was just how skilled this passing was. I mean, from the very beginning, from like the opening game, they were running him as the point guard. He was directing offense, and honestly, there are 2 plays that stood out to me most from Summer League. Obviously, the block in double overtime when he blocked Neemias Queta to save that game. But the other play was the first game against Houston. He had a transition. He was leading a fast break and just put a bullet straight to Caleb Houston in the corner for a 3. And I remember I think that was the point when I was watching that game where I was just like, I've seen enough. I know there's a whole debate about how guys should play in Summer League, and the Magic were super conservative with Paolo in Summer League, but that was a point where I was just like, okay, he's ready to play he's ready to play in the NBA. Like he doesn't need to be here, and he doesn't need to be here beyond just getting reps. And I think most Magic fans would say, we thought he wasn't a passer, or certainly not a passer like this. And that was something that really, really stood out at Summer League. I'm curious, I don't know how much of Summer League you were able to watch, but what stood out to you most from Paolo, or from what you were able to gather from Paolo from his Summer League run, granted it being fairly short?
Well, I think that he showed how good he can be without playing the way that he played in college. So in college, he got a lot of touches on the post, on the block, mid post, and we saw a totally different version of his game in Summer League. And it takes me back to a conversation I had last summer, and it was with Bam Adebayo. I was in Miami, and he was at a gym, and I'm a Blazers fan, so I was like, can you tell me what in the world made my Blazers select Zach Collins over you? And so I was like, I mean, franchise would be totally different if they took Bam. And so I know there's other franchises that probably regret passing on him. And so he said something to me that stood out. He said, when you go to a school like Kentucky or Duke, you have to sacrifice. So he said what scouts need to do is look at what a guy does when he's at those programs that have other 5-star recruits that were promised certain roles. He said, take what the guy does there. Now go back and look at his high school tape and see, is there something that he has in his game in high school? Maybe sometimes it's, sometimes you can't really use high school because it's totally different. But he was like, sometimes watch their film and then see if they're showing potential of a certain skill set. And so he said for him, the passing is something that he had in high school, but at Kentucky, he never had a chance to pass. You look at even back with Karl Anthony Towns, they say he was a shooter in high school. He didn't shoot threes at Kentucky. And so even though it's totally two different schools, but when I looked at Paolo's passing in high school when he was playing, point forward or handling the ball more, that's when I'm like, all right. He showed a little bit of it. Like he had a game against Syracuse, I believe, where he had like 5 or 6 assists or something like that. But it's a long-winded answer. But I wasn't surprised by the passing because I saw him make some of those same reads back when I was watching his AU film. And so I think that he didn't even really show the post game in Summer League. He just showed a totally different version. So I think once you combine everything that he has, I think he is just going to be a huge mismatch, especially in like this switching NBA. You get a guard on him and you switch, and now he can take him to the post. If you send the double, he can pick you apart. And so Orlando is going to be number one on my league pass because, of course, I've been promoting Banchero all year. But so long answer, but yeah, the passing at Summer League wasn't a big shock to me, but I'm glad that Orlando did their homework and they put him in a position to show what he can do. There was a play, I don't remember if was it the first game or it was the second game, where he hit a cutter. And it was a baseline cutter. He just threaded the needle and he just showed like I can make those plays. Now he did have some situations where he was forcing passes. I think he was trying to show of what he could do as a passer. But I thought like overall Summer League, he just showed that, hey, I can pass. I can make plays on defense. That was like the big knock on him. I love the fact that he took the challenge to defend Jabari Smith. I think he kind of took it personal. Like, they were saying you were better than me. I'm here to show you that I am. So I thought he played very, very well. Of course, there were some situations where he took some questionable shots, or I'd say like the biggest area that I have of concern is that he passes up open catch and shoot threes from time to time, and he'll take a contested shot. He did that a couple times, but I thought he shot the ball well from three also. So I'd have to give him an A.
I think. Like I said, by halftime of that first game, I was just like, this is that guy. This is that guy. And I think most Magic fans, whether they wanted Jabari, whether they wanted Chet, whether they wanted Paolo, I think they all came away from Summer League saying, we got a player here. And I think you could kind of feel the optimism around Magic fans with what they're thinking about this team. Like it does finally feel like Orlando has the star that they've been missing since Dwight Howard left. There are Magic fans talking about the play-in tournament, and I think it's certainly in the realm of possibility if Paolo has a Rookie of the Year caliber season. I agree with you. I think he was the most NBA ready. I think he is rightfully the favorite to win Rookie of the Year, regardless of whether he was the number one pick. I think he would have been and should be the favorite to do so because he'll put up the numbers. But I think it's going to be really interesting to watch how the Magic fit this team around him. And we'll talk. I want to talk specifically about Jalen Suggs and Franz Wagner here in a little bit. But I think what I want you to take a look at a little bit here is, obviously they have, I think the Magic in Summer League were looking to do very specific things with Paolo. I don't think they wanted to show that whole repertoire. I think you're right. Paolo didn't want to show the whole repertoire either. I think he kind of said he was kind of working his way back into playing shape and into playing feel, and certainly, kind of pushed himself maybe a little further than he should have. Both Houston and Sacramento brought hard doubles on him very quickly, and I don't think he was completely ready for that. But when you look at this Magic roster, how does he fit into what the Magic already have, knowing full well that it's probably going to come a time very, very soon that the team's going to have to start fitting around him, if that makes sense. Like how do you see this team kind of molding Paolo and where he fits in as he enters this really, really young team, obviously?
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I wanted Orlando to select him was because I felt like the Magic don't have a defined pecking order. And I kept saying, and you may agree or disagree. You watch the team more than I do. I felt like coming into this draft, if you did a poll of the players on the team and said who is the best player on this team, who is the closer, I think that you would have got multiple answers. And I felt like selecting Chet doesn't help that. Selecting Jabari doesn't help that because he's going to need somebody to get him open. And I felt like Banchero has the best opportunity to be the go-to guy. And then I think once you establish your go-to guy, the pieces, even though it may be difficult because there's still a lot of talent on Orlando, but the pecking order is a little off. But I think now you can start to figure out, okay, who works with him, who doesn't. And I think this first year is going to be all about figuring it out. There are some guys that are going to be moved, and it could be somebody that was a lottery pick within the last 3 or 4 years, because I think Banchero is the guy, and now it's just the pieces are going to have to fit. The play-in tournament, I mean that will be a very good situation, but like I said, I just think with this year you're going to have to figure out, okay, this guy can play off of him, and I think that if it goes the way I imagine it going, the shooters are going to be fine. It's the guys that struggle with knocking down shots or that need to kind of play with the ball in their hands a lot to be effective. I think those are going to be the ones the most negatively impacted.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I've kind of, in the context of, there's a lot of Magic fans who feel that, Paolo's already like on the star track, that they should go after a guy like Donovan Mitchell. And I think to your point, that might kind of throw off the pecking order a little bit. To some extent, I think right. I think this season, like I call this season kind of proof of concept. This is a season where you figure out, who you're actually building around, what pieces work, and start moving the team and molding the team to that group that you ultimately want to be. And I think that the Magic should let these kind of start figuring things out on their own this year before they start kind of around with it.
Yep.
They've got such ships already. Again, like essentially was in Vegas for those first two games, and. Honestly, I think to your point about the pecking order, I think that pecking order is super, super important for this team. And one concern that I have is that everyone is so friendly that they're going to be playing a little bit too much by committee, and they're not going to kind of set that pecking order that they're going to ultimately need. Now, again, like it may take one Paolo Banchero late game flurry for everyone to realize, oh, like that's the guy. I mean, it's the old Dennis Scott, Nick Anderson story. When Shaquille O'Neal came in, he's a bouncy young rookie, and Dennis and Nick in the league for a little while. They get through one practice and they're like, oh, Shaq is that guy. We should hitch our wagon with him.
You get it. Yeah.
Not Paolo's a Shaq level prospect, but it's probably going to take a moment like that in practice where everyone's like, oh, this kid can really play, and he go as far as he can take us. But you mentioned that note that, okay, like who's the guy that takes in the last couple seconds? And you're right. I think there are a lot of answers for the Magic on that question. I think Cole Anthony is probably the guy that actually would take that shot, but most fans would probably say Franz Wagner is the one who should be taking that shot. To that point, then let's dive into the Magic's rookies from last season. I don't know how much you were able to watch of them this season, but what were your takeaways from what you saw from Franz Wagner? We'll get into Jalen Suggs in a little bit, but let's start with Franz Wagner. What were your takeaways from what you saw from him, from his rookie season? It seemed like it was a rookie season that took a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, I mean he's very, very good. I do think that. I mean, you can make, at least for me, I can make a case and say he can buy a home in Orlando. I think he's
I think so too.
I think he's going to stay. If I had to like make a guess of like based off percentage, who has the highest percentage of staying, and I think it's him. Even though and Carroll kind of play the same position in a sense. I mean, I think in a closing, Franz is best at the 4. I mean, that's just my opinion. But I mean, he can play 3 and 4 and very versatile. But yeah, I mean, I think he caught people by surprise. I remember watching him. I spent a lot of my time in Europe scouting. I remember watching him it was just like 3 summers ago, I believe, at the under 18s. And the jump that he has made, like I thought he was good then, but he was really skinny to where he's at now in 3 years. It just basically tells me that, I mean, I think he can be an all-star by the time he's 25 or 26. And I think in a redraft, when 5 years from now, he could go higher than where he went. And so the big knock on him a little bit after his freshman year at Michigan was his outside shooting. And I think he's improved that. And I think he's going to continue to be a good shooter. So I mean, did he make all rookie? First team all rookie?
We were a little scared there. First team all rookie.
Was it first team?
I think only one
Okay, yeah.
left him off his ballot. Left him off the ballot for all rookie.
Okay. Yeah, and I think, I mean, it was such a strong
really
class.
Strong class.
And so in order to be one of the top 5 rookies in what some people are thinking is going to be a historic class, just shows how good a season he had, even though I think most people would have thought that it would have been Suggs that had the better rookie year. But yeah, I mean, I think Orlando Magic fans have to be very, very happy with Franz. And I'm on record of saying I think he is going to be an all-star at some point in his career.
I mean, Franz, I mean, took everyone by surprise. I kind of, I another draftism, I'm sure you hate it, and I'm sure you guard against it as much as anyone. The jack of all trades, master of none. Those guys are really good. Those guys are, if they're really good at a lot of different things, that's not a bad thing. Like being skilled. I mean, I think what took us by surprise with Franz was just how little he needed the ball to be effective. Again, we literally the whole season, everyone was begging the Magic to get him more shots, to get him the ball more. And it was just like, he just operates within the floor. And I think the biggest complaint that we had is that they didn't feature him enough. They didn't put him on the ball enough. They didn't use him in pick and rolls enough. And that's, I think, probably the next phase of his game. But by the same token, he's so smart. He isn't trying to force things. Like he doesn't want to be a one-on-one guy. And, again, that might be what holds him down from being a top option on the team. But now you have a Paolo Banchero next to him, a guy who's from on cuts. That's going to find the corners when he relocates. That should make him even more effective, even if he's not kind of hitting that per tier.
I wanted to add something about Wagner. Why I'm so high on him is I think usually for guys like him that, trying to think of the best way to word this. I had this conversation actually with, it was RJ Hampton's dad. And we were talking about players from different countries that are used to growing up playing quote unquote the right way and being in systems. And usually some of those guys can really get lost in the NBA, especially if they're on a team of young guys that are fighting for second contracts, right?
Honestly,
and
I remember when I was looking at Franz in the draft process, I was like, he would have killed it for Golden State. Not that Golden State made a bad choice taking Kuminga. If he was on Golden State, he'd be a key part of that championship team. He would have fit there just as easily as he fit with a bad team on the Magic. And I honestly thought this is the kind of player that will struggle with a bad team without the players to take advantage of all of his skills.
Yeah. So you get exactly where I was going with the comment. And so for him to stand out the way he did and being able to figure out how to be effective without having a high usage and playing with, I don't want to call him selfish, but just a young team. Usually if you have a young team with young guards, the ball doesn't move around as much as you would like it to. I look at a guy like Denny Avdia, for example. I was very high on Avdia. I think in a different situation, he's fine. But if he's in a situation where he is in Washington, where he's not playing with the ball in his hands and they kind of hide him in the corner, they don't maximize his strength as being like a jack of all trade, master of none. Wagner's obviously a better shooter, but even though both guys are, they have this European, very team-oriented background, Franz was able to figure it out while Dennis still kind of struggling with figuring his way and how to be effective, having the ball in his hands a lot, which, you play with Bill, even though Bill was injured a lot, he showed some signs at the end of the year when they kind of put him in as like their backup point guard, but that was like very, very late in the season. But Franz did very well. And that's why I think like if you once the pecking order is set and you have like and everybody kind of is comfortable with their standing in the team and the organization, or guys get their contracts, then I think he's really going to look a whole lot better, especially if you get like maybe even like a backup point guard, like a floor general. I mean, I'm not saying he's a good fit, but like a Rondo type guy that says like, all right, we're getting him touches, we're getting him shots,
like
this possessions, and knows how to manage the game.
I mean,
then I
and
think
we
he's
didn't
really
see
going to look
enough
good.
of this at the end of the season. Playing with a guy like Markelle Fultz, would help a ton. And I think the Magic are still kind of figuring out what Fultz is, and Fultz is still figuring out what he is after all the injuries he's had.
Yeah.
But I think we all understood very is the kind of guy that lifts everybody up. It was clear when he was on the floor, and he was playing with that backup unit for much of his time. Franz got hurt a little bit toward the end of the season. He rolled his ankle, and they shut him down a little bit. Then he came back and re-rolled it again. So he just didn't get a lot of time to play with a guy like Fultz. So there's definitely something there to unlock. You've noted a few times, and I'm a big believer of this too, that situation is a big piece of the puzzle for a lot of prospects. There are certainly prospects that overcome situation, but what role does Jamal Mosley play in the development of this young team, and how important is his influence in what we saw from the Magic last year, and how they'll continue to develop here?
I honestly think he has one of the top 5 toughest jobs in the league, simply because the talent is there on the team, but everyone is still trying to figure out their role in the NBA. They're still trying to establish who they are. And then you have a lot of redundancy on the roster, a lot of overlapping skill sets. And he's going to have to be the bad guy and make some guys unhappy, unless, it's like, a season where they say, we're just going to figure it out, and we're going to mix and match lineups. We may go 8, 9, 10 deep and then just kind of let things fall into place. I don't know if they're going to do that, but he has to. He has the tough job of trying to figure out, like, I don't even know like who their starting backcourt is.
That's the debate. Honestly,
everybody
that's
has
the
a
big
case.
Training camp battle is who. I think Markelle Fultz is going to start a point guard. I feel pretty comfortable with that. But let's get into it here. Jalen Suggs did not have a good rookie year. There's just no getting around it.
No.
And I think there would be a lot of value to having Gary Harris start at shooting guard, just to provide some veteran stability, add another shooter to help space the floor for Paolo and Franz. And what you're getting from Gary Harris. It's not going to be a mystery. And if the team is trying to win a little bit more, and again, we'll see how much or how long this team is going to try and win basketball games before the temptation of next year's draft sets in. But if they're trying to win basketball games, I kind of think Gary Harris gives you the best chance. Jalen Suggs will still be there; he will still get minutes, and there's still a lot of things he does really, really well, surprisingly well for. But again, kind of to your point about being the bad guy, there's if Jonathan Isaac's healthy, they're going to want to play him. Minute restriction, he's going to play a certain amount of games, but that's going to push Chuma Kiki a little bit out of the rotation, or that's going to push Mo Bamba's minutes and how they want to use Mo Bamba. They're not going to pair Bamba and Carter together again. I think that I think it's a thing that Carter can overcome, but Carter played, I think, like 67. He played 2/3 of his minutes alongside Bamba last year. A lot. I think part of Carter being so good was he had Bamba there to clean up some things on the back end. He was able to play against smaller power forwards. He wasn't going up against centers as often. So I think there is at least an open question of whether Wendell Carter can be a full-time starting center for a high-level team. I think there are questions he can answer, don't get me wrong, but they're questions nonetheless. So back to the backcourt then, what do you feel went wrong with Jalen Suggs in his rookie year, because it felt like entering the draft process or entering the draft stage, he was a can't miss guy. Like Magic fans were dancing up and down the aisles of the Amway Center when Toronto took Scotty Barnes ahead of him. Uh, you know, injuries certainly played a
Yeah,
role his rookie year, but what went
big
wrong
role.
with
Yeah.
Jalen Suggs this year, and how can he overcome that? How can he kind of overcome that and take that next step?
I mean, one, he has to be healthy. I think injuries really, really hurt him, and I just think like the motivation of kind of being the forgotten one in such a deep class, because like you said, everybody just kind of knew that he was going to Toronto to replace Kyle Lowry. But I think the biggest issue with Suggs is the shooting. I know like early in his freshman year at Gonzaga, he was knocking down shots, and it wasn't like his strong. I mean, I guess it wasn't like his greatest strength coming into college, but then he had like this hot streak where he got off to a really good start, and then the good start that he got off to, even though it tailed off as the season went on, he still finished with a respectable shooting percentage. And he got to the NBA, and it was more like the reputation that he had, as he needed to really improve as a shooter. I think he really struggled with his shot. And if I'm not mistaken, he had a good
Yeah,
summer league. I was looking at
he got hurt in summer league
yeah, I was
too,
looking
but
at my
yeah,
notes.
he had a really strong summer
Yeah,
league.
but he had like, I want to say like maybe like the first or second game, he looked like. I mean, I imagine. I think I was there. I was like, Orlando got them one. Like
I
they.
remember
I mean, he
writing
made
after the
some
Golden State
impactful
game, the
plays.
first game that they played, which they won in overtime, I believe. Um, I remember writing it like he's the real deal. Like this isn't a mirage.
Yeah.
This isn't anything else. Like he's competing hard defensively. He had that incredible block in regulation that forced overtime.
Yes, that's what it
And
was. Yeah.
again, like
Yeah.
let's be clear. Like Jalen Suggs really struggled offensively. He was I don't want to say elite defensively, but for a rookie, far advanced defensively. Like he was on point defensively, and I've kind of told people like maybe we are not saying he's going to be an all star, but he might be a smaller Marcus Smart, or he might be kind of that defensive stopper at the guard position. Again, it's just a question of whether he can hit shots consistent enough to keep defenses honest. And if that's what he is, yeah, you want a little bit more when you got the fifth pick in a really good draft like this, but you're still getting a really
Yep.
high level player, potential starter from a draft, and that's still not a bad thing at the end of the day. And again, I don't think the Magic should be giving up on Jalen Suggs by any stretch of the imagination. But there's definitely a feeling, like he said, that like, well, what do you do with him now? I joke with people that draft picks are like used cars; they lose value the moment you drive them off the lot. Um, it's true. Yeah, except
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 Paolo.
Paolo.
I
Paolo
think
Paolo
Paolo
looks
gained
like
some
he's
value.
he's a he's a
Yeah.
Lamborghini. He's a Lamborghini. But most cars,
Yeah.
you drive them off the lot, they start losing value. Now you have a year
Yeah.
of him playing under his belt to say like, okay, what is he now? And again, it's a prove it year for him to kind of say like, okay, what are you going to be in the NBA here, Jalen?
I have a question for you, since I've been asking people that follow Orlando this question. What is your closing lineup?
My closing,
Or like, what is your starting lineup, and what lineup do you close the game with? Because I mean, we really haven't
yeah,
even talked about Cole Anthony on in this episode, and he is, I think if you go into like a training camp with just an open camp and just say, all right, there's nobody is guaranteed a spot. I'm taking the best five guys, or best players. I still think Cole Anthony somehow comes out on top in an open competition.
like so.
And how do
I
you
think
how
so.
you juggle that?
Ideal world, my starting lineup is probably the same as my closing lineup. It's probably Markel, Gary Harris, Franz, Paolo, Wendell. If I'm in need of a
Okay.
defensive stop, and I think this is what's kind of going to be fascinating about this Magic team. If I need a basket, I'm probably still going Markel, but I'm not. If I need like a three, if it's like 5 seconds left, I have the ball, I need a three. Cole's going to be in there over Markel, no doubt about that. But if I have like a minute and a half, I'm down two or down five, I'm probably keeping Markel Markelle in there just to be a playmaker and be a creator. I probably still stick, but I might turn to Terrence Ross depending on who's hot that night from beyond the arc. You know, I probably still go Franz, Paolo, Wendell. Those three I think
Mostly.
are pretty set. But like if I'm up by 5 with a minute and a half to play, I might swap, at least at this point, and depending on health, of course, I might swap Paolo out for Isaac. I might swap Jalen Suggs in there somewhere just to get stops, just because I need stops are the most important. I can figure out the offense later, but I need stops are really, really important. And to your point about the pecking order, that's kind of part of the problem the Magic have is they have all these different pieces that in a lot of ways they don't know really what they have yet. And so there's going to be some mixing and matching. There's going to be some,
Yeah.
let's play it by committee. Like we know that Cole is reliable for a big shot if we need him to make a big shot. You know, we know that Markelle Fultz can get in the paint whenever he wants, but can't hit a three to say we can't rely on him to hit a three. I don't want to say he can't hit a three in his life. He can, but you know, it's not something you want to rely on in a playoff series. Like a playoff series, the really good teams are going to be able to scheme this team into oblivion. Like they are not a playoff team yet. There's just too many guys with too many weaknesses. But a regular run of the mill January NBA game that you need to get a win or you have a chance to win. Honestly, like I think I would stick with that group of Markelle, Gary, Franz, Paolo, Wendell. But it honestly might depend on who's hot that night. You know, what the team needs, the situation that the team's in, time and score would matter. And I think those options are good. But to your point as well, the pecking order, everyone understanding their role, knowing their role, being able to rely on that role is really, really important in team too. I think that's something the Magic are going to have. As good as the vibes are with everyone feeling great and loving each other right now, those vibes may change when Jamal Mosley says, I'm going to go with Markelle over Cole in this clutch situation, or I'm going to go with, you know, Isaac over Paolo right, you know, for this defensive play. You know, feelings are going to get hurt. And you know, this team has not played with any pressure at all for the last year. They're going to put some winning pressure on this team, and it's going to be really telling to see who responds and how they respond.
And what's even more interesting to me, we haven't talked about RJ Hampton, who, you know,
Yeah.
he won like Rookie of the Month at the end of his first season there, and he just seems like he is the odd man out. And he opted to play in summer league to try to help himself out. And I mean, you know, people were kind of critical of his performance in summer league, but if you're looking at it right now, he's like at best your third point guard, your third shooting guard, and maybe fifth shooting guard if you think about it. And so he's in a weird situation. But people were just so high on him in Orlando, you know, 15 months ago, maybe even 12 months ago.
And I think to that point, I think RJ was better at summer league than people gave him credit for. I think there were some big mistakes and big moments, and I think people expected him to be a little bit more advanced or look a little bit more comfortable. But at the same time, I think the Magic were also putting him in uncomfortable situations to try and test him and see where he was at in that role. I think that throughout the season last year, they put him in a lot of bad situations. He was a really good catch and shoot 3-point shooter last year. One of the better 3-point shooters on the team last year, which is not something that he was particularly known for coming out of New Zealand, coming out of the NBL. That there's still a ton of talent there. And to me, with RJ, a lot of it has been about control. It always feels like he is going faster than he can think, and that leads to making at times. But if he ever can click that and find it, like again, that's another super talent player they have on their roster. You know, another guy that I know I brought him up, but another guy that we didn't talk about is Chuma Okeke, who a lot of things that NBA people really, really like. He's had his own bout with injuries. He struggled to stay healthy consistently too. But he does a lot of really good things as well that, you know, that would fit for a lot of teams and would be really valuable for this team too. There's a through with this team. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, Jamal Mosley has his hands full because again, there's so many young guys, there's so much talent, so many overlapping skill sets, and I mean, there's so many guys that Orlando has invested in, and they want to, at least give the guys a fair opportunity. But I imagine that they're just going to have to consolidate the roster, and I can't think of the best situation. Like what, it's not one of those things where this trade makes the most sense. But I guess people want Donovan Mitchell,
I mean,
so that would be
I think,
that would
like,
be
look,
good.
I know I've come out against it. I just think the team isn't ready for it. Like, if you, I mean, yes, Donovan Mitchell's under
Yeah,
contract for 4 more years, but this team's not ready to win yet. Like I view this as a proof of
yeah,
concept season. This is a season where you kind of show what it'll look like when this team's ready to win, and you start putting the pieces around him. You get Donovan Mitchell, all of a sudden you're winning now. Like, if you're not winning now, you're failing. That's the kind of player Donovan Mitchell is, especially with the assets and the players that you would have to give up for him. My point to a lot of people has been, it's good that we're having this conversation and that the Magic do have pieces and the players to maybe go get it done. That's a good thing.
yeah,
That's where you want to be as a team like Orlando. And like you said, I agree. I think that consolidation trade is probably next summer. They have to start consolidating some pieces because contracts are going to start going up. They do have rookie contracts that they got to deal with, but I think that consolidation trade is coming pretty quickly. I'm not sold that now is the right time to do it, but again, Orlando has 2 draft picks. One's going to probably be in the lottery next year. We don't know what the Chicago is going to be next year's draft. You would know better than me, is looking like a pretty good draft, especially in the lottery. And so
yeah.
the Magical, I think the Magic will, if this season goes the way that they hope it goes, I think that they will be players for whichever superstar is looking to move out somewhere, and find a new home. Which, again, I've told people who are like, well, you know, if you're not doing it for Donovan Mitchell, this is the golden goose. This is the golden opportunity to do it. He's under control for 4 years. He's in your time frame, and I'm just like, this is the NBA. Someone's gonna come free. Someone's gonna ask for a trade that you don't
Yeah.
expect. Or Atlanta got DeJounte Murray. No, I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. It's the NBA. You'll find that opportunity, and it's just being ready when that opportunity comes and being flexible enough to go get it.
Yeah, and I'm actually surprised that Atlanta got Murray. I thought that they had the pieces to where they could go after Bill if Bill wanted to leave, and it was somebody else that I thought that they had the pieces to be able to make the move. Which, if they got Murray, that means if Bill, well, I guess he has a no trade clause, but Orlando could be the next team in line, especially if they do well and just show enough promise next season. Then that's when they're one move away from being, especially with with possibly 2 picks next year. I mean, they can possibly put themselves in position to get anybody, any big, especially, and if Banchero plays well, like I think he will. Then we're best case scenario, we could be talking about 2 years from now, just making this huge, huge jump. So it just, you haven't been able to say it a lot lately, but I do think there's a lot to be optimistic about if you're a
Like
fan.
I said, it it's proof of concept season. Like let's see what Paolo is. Like, I know a lot of people are high Paolo, and they should be, but we still haven't seen him play an NBA game yet. So let's see what it looks like getting through an NBA season. Let's see what the rest of these pieces look like, and then happens there. Rafael, I really appreciate you coming on to the show and giving us your perspective both on Paolo and this Magic roster, and a little bit of insight into your draft prep. Obviously, we're kind of in a little bit of a dead period, but the draft never sleeps. So tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it. I mean, we've
Yeah,
kind of seen each other. This is our first time really like connecting, so I enjoyed it. Anytime you want me on, let me know. But you can reach me at Barlowe 500 on Twitter. I'm usually active on there. I just had a baby 2 weeks ago today,
congratulations.
so I've kind of Thanks. I got a little boy, so I haven't been as active on Twitter the last couple of weeks. And then the NBA Big Board podcast, which is year round, and so I've kind of taken a break from that. But I'll be back on that starting within the next couple of days. But that's where you can find me at. And then I took over for Chad Ford a few months back, and I have a NBA draft newsletter. It's behind a paywall, but it's exclusive content. I get a lot of feedback from different front office executives and scouts, and just kind of mix in my opinions with their thoughts. And I have a lot of that in the newsletter. And so even though it is kind of like a dead season in a sense, I'll still be going with that. So you can reach me there at nbabigboard.com. And, I respond to as many tweets as I can, and then also email. So that's where you can find me at.
Rafael, most important question I have to ask, what is your child's wingspan? Because I want to get him on the radar as early as possible.
Well, I don't think you have to worry about that unless it's some freak of nature. I'm not tall. His mom's not tall. So you don't really look for wingspans and point guards. So,
you say that. You say that. No,
yeah, I mean, I have a friend of mine. It's weird. He's 6'11" with like a 7'4" wingspan. I met his mom. She's 5'2". I'm like, man, your dad must be tall. He's like, no, my dad is 5'6". I'm like, what in the world? And he's like, it just skipped generations and generations and generations. So if I am that lucky, then that'll be awesome. But I'm grooming him for the front office.
There you go. Well, Rafael, appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your thoughts. You can, of course, I'll close the show here, but you can follow me on Twitter at @PhilipR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, all of my download podcasts to your favorite podcast-enabled listening device. That's also where you can find the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast as well. I always get that one wrong, so hopefully I got it right that time. Please correct me if I botch that. There's so many Locked Ons.
Yep. Because it was Locked On NBA Draft, and then they combined it to Locked On NBA Big Board, and I mean, I messed it up. It
happens to the best. It happens to the best of us. But for Rafael, for me, Philip Rossman-Reich, over at Locked On Magic and Orlando Magic Daily, thank you all for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. We'll catch you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.